Hello. I'm very sorry I haven't made a video in a long time. I honestly just have not had anything to talk about at all. But today I got new material. So if you watched my video about, what was it called? Tumors. What was it? Tumors and surgery with no anesthetic. Then you know about my wrist thing that I have. That I was afraid was a tumor. Now, looking online and figuring things out myself, I figured that it was basically like a fluid pocket caused by, either the ligaments and tendons or my nerve sheath in my wrist, and, it's a relatively common condition, and not cancerous. And as I said in that video, I'm like, yay, it's not cancer. So, I was just going to wait it out because I'm like, it's not cancer, maybe it'll go away. It stopped growing about 2 weeks after I made that video at the beginning of April, and I thought, okay, I'll leave it alone, see what happens. It wasn't going away. It's now, almost the middle of May, and it's not going away. So I thought, okay, finally, I'll go to a doctor. I finally found a service that helps you link up with doctors that speak English. So I found one in my area, and I went there. And it was my hope that I would have a better experience this time, with Japanese doctors than I did last time with my crazy cut-your-arm-open lady. No, I really didn't. And you know what I have to say? Fuck the Japanese healthcare system. I don't give a shit. People are like, oh my god, it's so amazing. It's like, no, it's fucking not. And people bitch and moan and go, oh, the Canadian healthcare system, people say it's not that great. You have socialized healthcare, it's not that great. You know what? I spent fucking 20-some years in Canada, and I have never had as shitty a fucking experience with the Canadian healthcare system as I have every fucking time I went to Japanese doctors. I'm sorry, but I'm fucking done. The healthcare system here, for my experience personally, fucking blows. And I know I have many American friends who are like, well, it's actually really good. I'm like, yeah, in your experience, because you come from America where you have no socialized medicine. Of course it's amazing. I know what your system is like in theory, and it sounds terrible, especially for those of us who don't have a lot of money. So I understand that coming here and paying a very small amount for your services, regardless of the quality you get and attention, is amazing. But here's the thing, I don't come from America, I come from Canada, and when I ask my friends who are Australian or my friends who are British, who I also work with, they're like, yeah, it's fucking shit here compared to where I'm from. I'm like, thank you very much. Because we're not happy with a system where there's money involved, because here's the thing, is that everybody says, oh, Japan has socialized medicine. Yes, but it's not like it is, with the British healthcare system or the Canadian healthcare system, where you walk in, you're seen, and you walk the fuck out, and you pay $0. This is not the Japanese healthcare system, and this is something I think people don't realize, is that you always pay. You always pay in the Japanese healthcare system. It is not free, it is not 100% social. You always pay. Now, if you're on the national health insurance plan, I believe you pay 20%, but you also have to basically pay a monthly health insurance fee. It's not taken, like in the Canadian system, we don't pay a health insurance fee. There is no health insurance, or at least, not in my province. There are some private places in Quebec, but not where I'm from. I'm from Ontario. I paid $0 directly to healthcare, ever. My mother, my grandmother, all my family, $0 to healthcare, ever. In Japan, you have to pay health insurance. Now, you can have it, the government ones, which people say, I've never paid for that one, so people say it's more expensive. But I believe it covers 80% of whatever you have done. But you still have to pay 20%, which means every month you go, wow, I just paid this really big amount, and if I want to see the doctor, I have to pay again. It's like, why is this not just figured out so that it's 100% covered? I don't understand this pay a teensy-tiny bit kind of thing, because it just, to me, it discourages me from wanting to go, because I go, yeah, I paid a fuck ton of money. You know how much I pay every month? Okay, my last paycheck here, I paid roughly the equivalent. Now this is pension and healthcare combined. I paid about $240 for this shit, and I paid that every month since, oh god, it's been like a year and a half I've now worked at my job. I paid that much. And now this does cover, you know, the same amount on dental work, which I have had done. But overall, if I had paid out of pocket for everything I've needed to have done, it would have amounted to, Jesus Christ, like a 30th of that. It's like, I know that you're paying so that, you know, in case you, it's an insurance thing. It's health insurance. It's insurance. I understand that not, you know, things don't go wrong all the time, but Jesus Christ. Especially since, also, on the same paycheck, I'm paying $240 for healthcare, but I'm also paying, on top of that, taxes. $400 in taxes off my paycheck. I don't make very much money. That's more than a fifth of my paycheck I'm paying to this stuff. Like, that's a little bit exorbitant. I'm sorry. Especially for the service I get, which I'll come to in a minute. But no, it's like, for those of us with fully tax-funded healthcare systems, the Japanese system doesn't look so good. It's really not. So, yeah, anyway, I wanted to have my wrist seen finally because I had a little bit of a skateboarding accident. I decided to learn how to skateboard, and my palm bruises are gone, but I fell on my ass a lot, and that impact on my wrist here caused this lump to really flare up. So I said, okay, screw it, I'm going to find a doctor that speaks English, I'm going to go. So I did today, and I went in during, it's a clinic, and I'll try to remember to explain more about the clinic system in Japan, but this clinic specialized, I guess, in tumors and lumps and bone conditions and various other things like that. So I thought, okay, perfect. So I went in during their walk-in hours, and the wait time was not bad. You know, for a clinic, again, people bitch about Canadian walk-in times, but honestly, like, walking in there versus walking in Canada, the times were really not that much different. It was like 40 minutes wait. Not that big of a difference. The quality of care, on the other hand, was massively, massively different. So I spent 40 minutes waiting in the waiting room, walked into the doctor's room when they finally called me. He takes my wrist and he goes right on the lump. Of course, just like that other one did, the other doctor who cut me open so horrifyingly. And he squeezes my wrist. He's like, yeah, it's well, first word he used, I'm like, wait, what? The first word he used was tumour. The word he was going for was a ganglion cyst, which, you know, again, I believe it's the mylar sheath. The sheath of your nerves, you know, more or less, creates a fluid pocket. It's a cyst. It's not, you know, the tumour per se. Like, tumour, benign, don't freak out. I'm like, okay, thank you. But yeah, first thing he wanted to do was basically nothing. And then I'm like, well, wait, you're just going to kick me out? He's like, yeah, just wait it off. I'm like, it's not going away. I've had this for over a month. You can't just tell me go the fuck home and deal with it. He's like, okay, fine. We have a specialist who comes in at 6 o'clock, so come back in 3.5 hours, and we'll see you then. So I got an appointment card. And I went and fucked around for 3 hours, came back right on time. And then despite the fact that I had an appointment and people, oh, Canadian wait times are so bad, they made me wait for over an hour past my actual scheduled appointment time. I was not walking in the second time. This was a scheduled appointment and they made me wait an hour. Never had that happen in Canada. Ever. Maybe a doctor runs a bit late, 20 minutes max, but a scheduled appointment time, no. And again, I'm standing up for the Canadian healthcare system really hard here because I'm sick and fucking tired of people bitching about it. No, move to Japan, Canadians, and then tell me how bad Canadian healthcare is, really. So, finally, the next doctor sees me. And keep in mind, the first doctor, he literally spent, if I had timed it on a watch, it would have been less than 1 minute and 30 seconds with me. And that was it. It's just like, yeah, writing this on your sheet. All right, come back in 3 hours. Bye. Yeah, I've never been treated that quickly. The second doctor legitimately tried to do the exact same fucking thing, and he was supposed to be a specialist. He legitimately tried to kick me out after doing the exact same horrible squeeze thing the first doctor did and say, just come, come the fuck back in a month and see, let's see if it's gotten any better. It might go down on its own. I'm like, I've had this for over a month now. It's not going away. It's not going away. You've got to do something about it. So I stopped him and I basically said, no, I'm not leaving this room unless you lance this. I know I'm terrified of having things stuck in my skin, but I need this fucking lanced. I need it fixed. You've got to do something more than just say, come back in a month and a half. So he's like, oh, fine. So he gets out a needle. Once again, like a thick needle, not like a normal blood-taking needle. This was a thick, thick, thick needle, and jabs it right in my wrist. And then he strains, trying to, suck the center out of this thing, and it was a bit too viscous to come out. Lovely. So he pulls the needle out, and then he just goes, again, and keep in mind, I have no pain meds at this point. This one honestly wasn't as bad because, I prepped myself for this because I just knew it was coming. I knew the quality with which Japanese doctors seem to treat fluid-filled lumps as health conditions. So I knew it was coming. I did. Fuck. In this one, it was a small hole because he was using a needle, not a scalpel, so he squeezes on it a bit. And a bit of fluid comes out. Did he even bother? Like, he didn't even... I'm so pissed about this stuff. He didn't even want to spend enough time with me to actually squeeze it properly. And it could be because he's like, oh, it'll just fill back up again. It has to naturally stop filling on its own. You just have to leave it. She's worrying too much and she's not going with the treatment I suggested, so I'm just going to do this to humor her, which is honestly what I think he was doing. He was trying to humor me by draining this a tiny bit. So he squeezed it a little bit until a little bit of the pus came out, not even half of it, and slapped this Band-Aid on it, and said, yeah, come back in a month, and we'll see how it looks then. His only other suggestion, on the other hand, was, and what he pushed for far more than stabbing me in the wrist with a needle to actually make it smaller, was for me to get a really expensive MRI so he could see what was going on better in there. I'm like, that sounds incredibly expensive. He's like, yeah, it's expensive. I'm like, I'm not getting a fucking MRI on my wrist when we both know exactly what my condition is. It's not necessary unless you're actually planning on scheduling an operation where you remove the actual sac so that it doesn't come back, which is not what he was proposing to do. Therefore, getting an MRI would have done absolutely nothing. We knew what it was. So again, that's another thing that I don't like about the Japanese healthcare system. It really... Every doctor I've been to, aside from the first one where she just didn't give a shit and wanted me the fuck out of her office, it's always been a very much for-profit feel about it. It's like they push for you to get tests that are unnecessary because they want the money for it. And I don't like that. I don't like feeling like I can't trust my doctors and what they're saying and what tests they want to run because I feel like they just want to screw me out of money, basically. And that's exactly what it felt like. And I absolutely said no to the MRI. But, now what did I get? In total, even with him stabbing that thing into my wrist, the second doctor, I believe it took about 4 minutes for me to say fuck no on the MRI and for him to stab my wrist and poorly drain it. So, in total, between my two doctors, I got less than 5 minutes. Now, my health insurance plan is private, so between my 2 visits, I paid... Of course, Americans will say, oh my god, you only paid that? Yeah, but still, think about this. I got less than 5 minutes worth of care. It did nothing. Like, my wrist, okay, I showed you before, does it not look about the same? Yeah. Now, it got a bit bigger since last time I showed you guys, so this is actually down from what it was by a little bit, but I still have a giant fucking lump in my wrist, and I have nothing to show for it. 0. And I ended up wasting in total about 3 hours of my life in waiting rooms and travel time and all that other shit. And I ended up paying, not very much. It was about $13 between the 2 trips. So yeah, okay, so that's really low. But keep in mind, my insurance pays like 70% of this. So what the doctor was compensated for the complete lack of care I've received was 70% more than that. What in the fuck? That is absolutely ludicrous. That wasn't healthcare. It wasn't healthcare. It was neglect. It was complete and utter medical neglect. And he got paid, $70 for that? Fuck that shit. Fuck that shit. Like, for 5 minutes work, 2 doctors were paid $70. That is the highest premium on time I have ever heard of. It's like, good God, guys, you're getting paid like more than $10 a minute for your services. You're getting paid like $11-12 a minute. That is just complete and utter greed. And here's the other thing too, is that from what I can tell, because there is a difference in the cost of various clinics, doctors seem to be able to set their own prices here. So they can really get greedy. They can really, really get greedy. And the thing too is when they charge you, they just say, yeah, this is what you owe us. You don't really, like, I can't read the statement. They know I can't read the statement because they know I can't speak Japanese. They could charge me whatever the fuck they wanted or say I got whatever treatments they wanted and I would never know. Now, to be fair, it's Japan and I figure they're relatively honest in that respect, although they don't seem to be too, perturbed about cheating you out of money when it comes to, ordering unnecessary tests. But still, I don't know. Anyway, let's see. So, yeah, I've sort of gone over what I wanted to go over between Japan and Canada. Now, Canada, people complain about waiting times, but the problem is, if you're going to compare Japan and Canada, it's actually very difficult, because in Canada, when people bitch about waiting times, they're talking about emergency rooms. They're not talking about, going to a walk-in clinic. They're not talking about going to their doctor, family doctor. And that's the problem with comparing it to Japan and wait times, is that it is really difficult to actually go to an ER here. If you see a doctor for something that normally, in Canada you might go to an ER for, because you want somebody who has surgical experience, like a surgery doctor, which is where you would expect to find them, a hospital. You don't find them at a hospital in Japan. Where you're going to go is you're going to go to a specialty clinic, like I went to. And that's why I have many English students who don't understand that a clinic is a clinic and a hospital is a hospital. They just call all clinics hospitals, which is almost valid, because they have their surgeons in clinics. They don't work in hospitals most of the time. So, comparing waiting times is hard. Now, in big city hospitals, I honestly have never had a wait time, even on a busy day, that was over 2 hours, which, I've never had a life-threatening issue at a hospital, and I'm okay with waiting that long if I go at a busy time. That's fine. The worst wait time, my hometown has a notoriously poor hospital for Canada. It's honestly like the worst hospital I have ever heard of in Canada, which is the Peterborough, Ontario hospital. It's absolutely terrible. But even there, I've never had just the lack of concern and lack of care and lack of time being spent with me that I experienced in Japan. Just never. Going to walk-in clinics in Canada, they've honestly been quite good. Quite good. Now, people say, oh, well, in Canada you can't get yourself a general practitioner. And yes, this is true, because they don't, again, because we're completely government funded, you get paid a certain amount for your job, and, GPs don't get paid that much. My family doctor quit practicing when I was about 11 or 12, and then moved to being a hospitalist because they pay better. And, that's caused a problem with lack of family doctors, but you know what? There have been a lot more walk-in clinics, and I have never had an issue with the treatment I've received there, and honestly, I'd rather do that. I don't want to take up some doctor's roster when I, only need to see them once a year, maybe twice, like for just minor things that take 20 minutes to actually deal with, and then I'm done. 20 minutes to properly deal with, mind you. But no, I've never felt rushed or pushed out of a clinic in Canada, and I've always gotten at least 20 minutes worth of time, been properly seen, properly examined, properly, talked to about my condition. And this isn't a language barrier thing here, because I specifically went to this particular Japanese clinic because they had good English and were recommended as an English-speaking clinic, and they did speak quite good English, so it was not an issue of being able to speak to me that they were rushing me out. They just did not give a shit. And I have always been treated properly by doctors in Canada like they gave a shit. You know, a hell of a lot more than here. So, there's that. Now, to talk about something else, and this is, you know, again, like, this is all anecdotal, but speaking of ERs in Japan, because, you know, I've talked to people, I said, well, you know, like, if I had an emergency, like I was having a heart attack, or I snapped my arm, or how on earth do I go to an ER here? Because I just really have never seen one, and I know of one. I don't know exactly where it is, but I've heard of one. But for the most part, like on a map, when you see a sign that's a hospital, it's not a hospital, it's a clinic, and clinics all have hours. So I'm like, if I broke my arm at 3 o'clock in the morning, where the fuck do I go? Because I legitimately don't know how to contact emergency services here, and this is kind of serious. I could get hit by a car tomorrow, you know, walking around at 2 in the morning while I'm jogging, and I would just die because I don't know where I'm supposed to go. And so, supposedly there are emergency rooms that are open 24 hours a day, but I've been told some lovely stories about these places by Japanese people that I teach. The best story I heard was from one of my students where I said to him, I'm like, oh, how are you? He's like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm like, oh, what's wrong? It's like, I just had a really bad weekend. I'm like, well, what happened? And he said that just after midnight, he got, you know, really, really terrible stomach pain. And I said, oh, you know, did you call an ambulance? He said, yeah, I called an ambulance. And I'm like, well, you don't sound too thrilled about the ambulances. He's like, no, they're terrible. They drive slow, and there are a lot of other problems. I'm like, oh, do tell. And he said, well, the ambulance drove around, just aimlessly, basically, calling hospitals to see if any of them would take him. And he was declined at every single one. Reason being that they said, he's got crippling stomach pain. It's not serious enough. And it wasn't that these hospitals were too busy or they were, you know, full, they were flooded with people. That was not the reason. They legitimately just did not feel that his condition was serious enough to merit an emergency room visit. And this is a thing about Japanese ERs. If they deem that your issue is not significant enough, they will kick you the fuck out, refuse to see you. In Canada, people go when they think they might have the swine flu, and that's perfectly okay. But in Japan, they just will not see you. They'll say, yeah, suck it the fuck up and go see one of those, you know, hospital clinics in the morning. Like, that's what they do. Even when you're in a fucking ambulance and the paramedics are trying to take care of you, they will just flat out say, fuck you, go home. So, basically, the ambulance drivers were like, well, we called 5 hospitals. They won't take you, so you're gonna have to go home. He's like, but I feel like I'm dying. They're like, yeah, there's nothing we can do. They will not accept you as a patient. Sorry, go home. So he went home. Then about 3 hours later, his appendix exploded because he had extreme appendicitis. And, yeah, then they finally took him into the hospital and actually saw him. But I believe he said it was the next morning because, yeah, his appendix exploded and then he had to wait several hours because he felt that he'd have a better chance of being seen in the day. So he went back during the day, and then they finally saw him and he had emergency surgery and almost died. So, there's that. That's just fucking lovely. So, Japanese healthcare service, man. Like, seriously, I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed at all. I'm not impressed by a single story I've ever been told. Like, when I had to, like, hear, you know, another thing. Your company seems to be allowed to request that you get a mandatory health check. Fuck if I understand why. It's any of their business how healthy I am. But they seem to be able to do this. So I was told when I had to get mine beforehand by both Japanese people and also by foreigners who have had it done before. They said, whatever results you get back, they're going to find something wrong with you that's going to require usually an expensive set of additional testing just ignore that shit unless it's something that you really suspect might be true. Good chance it's not true. Lo and behold, yep, I got that, and so did everybody else who went on the check with me. There's always one thing where they're like, oh, this particular, oh, that's a little bit swollen, or I don't know the coloration on this. I'm not sure about that. And every single time it would require a set of like blood tests and maybe some scans, maybe an MRI or something like that. Every single fucking time. Like, oh god, this healthcare system, like they just do not give a shit. It's like the rudest healthcare system in the world. Basically, the Japanese healthcare system is, fuck you, we don't care about how much pain you're in, we don't give a shit about your issue. Would you like to take these expensive and unnecessary tests? No? You don't want to give us more money? Then go the fuck home and go fuck yourself and die in a corner. Because that's honestly how I feel about this healthcare system and the way I've been treated, the way a lot of the people I know have been treated. You know? Again, my friend was pretty sure he broke his foot, so they gave him scans and whatnot, and, you know, they said they found nothing, but they really didn't spend much time with him and then said, yeah, fuck you, go home. Again, fuck you, go home. It's like, he can't walk on his foot. There's clearly something wrong with it in some capacity. It's not a sprain. It's been hurting him for over a month now. There's something wrong with his foot. He's crippled. He's limping everywhere. And you're just gonna say, yeah, fuck you, go home. So, yeah, anyway. Japanese healthcare. Fuck you, go home. I'm so mad. I'm so mad. And I pay these motherfuckers $250 a month for them to do this, and it just, oh god, it's disgusting. But yeah, like, for anybody who bitches about Canadian healthcare, it's like, yeah, I came from the Peterborough Hospital where they do not treat people well. They really don't. And you might have to go back and see them 4 times before, you know, not the clinics, but the actual ER, before they figure out what the fuck is wrong with you. But they give it a bit more of an effort, at least. And you know what? I don't pay them jack shit. When I lived in Canada, I didn't make a lot of money, and you know what that afforded me? That afforded me the right to not pay any taxes, because I never made above the minimum standard for paying taxes, and therefore my healthcare literally has always been 100% free in Canada. In Japan, no, you're always going to pay for that shit. Doesn't matter how little you make, you will pay for that shit. So, and in big cities, in Ottawa, healthcare was amazing. And in clinics, and even my hometown in Peterborough, care was amazing. I had some great doctors. So, here's the thing. If there are any Canadians watching this, shut the fuck up and stop bitching about Canadian healthcare, because you have no fucking clue. Try paying for that shit, $250 a month, and then imagine being seen for a quarter, a fifth, a sixth of the time you normally are, and have the answer, regardless of how obvious your issue is, being, fuck you, go home. Whether your appendix is bursting, your foot is broken, or you've got a fucking tumor in your wrist. The answer is, fuck you, go home. Or, here's a knife. Let me cut you open with no anesthetic. Choose one, you know? Like, it's literally, like, bottom of the barrel is my experience here. And I'm sure, you know what, like, this is my personal experience, and, you know, some experiences of people around me. I'm sure that probably the Japanese healthcare system has been wonderful to some people. I'm sure. But it hasn't been wonderful to me. And it hasn't been wonderful from, like, I've asked people around me, I've never gotten back any particularly positive stories. The only things I've heard are Americans saying, hey, that didn't cost me very much. I'm like, but did you get good service? Like, well, no, but it didn't cost me very much. If that's the best thing you can say about it, is that it's less gougy than America, like, that's not that great of an endorsement. I'm sorry, but, you know, it's like, I guess, you know, if you're absolutely dying, then maybe it would be better. But on the other hand, if you're absolutely dying, they're still going to say, fuck you, go home. You're, you know, like, so no, I don't really think it's particularly laudable. And they really seem to get a lot more credit in general, at least from what I've heard in North American media, for, you know, having a good socialized healthcare system than what is actually here. Because it's shit. It's absolute shit. So stop talking up Japanese healthcare. It's fucking shit. And I will never recommend it to anybody. Like, you know what? Honestly, if I have a heart attack and you know, I'm dying on the street, I'm just gonna be like, well, might as well just stay here and hang out on the pavement, because, I'm sure if I get in a Japanese ambulance, they're just gonna say, fuck you, go home. So, anyway, I'm done with my rant. Just to wrap this up with a completely unrelated thing. I was added to a Google Circle by a YouTube channel that I watch quite avidly. Not sure why, but, you know, they follow about 5,000 people, and, so being added to their circles doesn't mean a whole lot, but I wasn't following them on Google+, so the fact that they added me, I'm very happy. Made me feel a little bit special and a little bit warm inside, so I would like to give a shout out to them. The Young Turks, which is kind of, it's an internet news channel, which I really, really like. Their main issue that they support is getting money out of American politics, and honestly, I would totally join them if I was an American, but I'm not, so there's not really a whole lot I can do on that front as far as I've been able to tell. But if you're an American and you would like to get money out of politics, very important issue, go to wolf-pack.com, so I'm going to pimp them because, hey, you guys made me feel a little bit warm inside, so thank you for that. Anyway, I will overall keep you guys posted, because I have an appointment to go back and pay like another $10 to be told fuck you, go home in a month. So when I finally get this shit sorted out, probably going to be when I go back home to Canada, quite honestly, because I'm not getting the impression Japan's going to help me much. But I will let you guys know how my annoying, terrible medical saga turns out. So, yeah, anyway, goodbye and have a good night.